I've engaged a lot with lawmakers over the last month and a half, 2 months, and we've had very deep and detailed discussions. Senate hearings are coming, congressional inquiries are coming. There's a lot of interest in the legislative branch about the future of cryptocurrencies. And what's positive about that conversation is there's a wholesale acknowledgement amongst most reasonable politicians that crypto is here to stay. Markets go up, markets go down. Some people commit fraudulent behavior. But just like the traditional marketplaces and traditional technologies, that no way invalidates the fact that this is a revolutionary technology that has a lot of use and utility behind it that is fundamentally transformative. That said, rules need to be established. The game has to be kind of figured out because right now it's not working as well as it needs to. And so finally, the legislative branch is waking up to that, and something will come in the United States. And I believe that something will, like Sarbanes-Oxley or these other standards, ripple through the entire world, and regulations will be made in reflection of, contrast to, or a merger in some capacity with what the U.S. standards become.
Now, taking Charles' perspective into account, I want to dive into some on-chain analysis of Cardano, some chart analysis, and then some price predictions. So let's hop right in and take a look. Want to kind of give you guys a good idea of where we could be headed here in the midterm and long term for Cardano. So right now we're looking at some on-chain analytics. First of all, I want to point out, there's this lot of talk about new wallets coming into the ecosystem. And while that is true, we actually grew a lot faster as a Cardano ecosystem throughout 2021 than we have so far in 2022. We've grown at a little bit of a slower rate. Obviously, we have some bear market woes in 2022, which we didn't have in 2021. So there's a lot to consider there. We see the same type of trend when we look back, at 2021 in terms of the amount of new wallets that were being added daily for ADA. And now when we look in 2022, this is kind of flattened off a little, and, we're adding between 1,000 and 2,000 new ADA wallets a day. So we're seeing a little bit of a pullback in terms of the new users coming into the ecosystem. And we'll talk about the devs here in a minute. But something that's kind of, somewhat, I would say positive is we've seem to have found somewhat of a bottom here on adjusted volume. For a while, a couple weeks ago when I covered ADA, we were still kind of on the downswing here, and it seems as though we found somewhat of a bottom. And luckily, that bottom is higher than this previous resistance we experienced back at the beginning of this year. We've actually flipped that into a support in terms of transactions. Now, obviously, that volume can, switch on a dime. But I just wanted to point out that volume is still somewhat strong given how hard the times have been for ADA and the rest of crypto. Now, the next thing I want to talk about, this is more so on the developer side, and I think this is really, really exciting. So, back at the beginning of the year, ADA had around 500 projects, around in February. Last month, 2 months ago, they updated with 900 projects. And now this seems to just have accelerated. So now this isn't total projects. Some of these are going to be, multiple Plutus scripts for one project, right? But what a Plutus script is it's essentially the smart contract one would use to develop an application on Cardano. So all these Pluto scripts that we're seeing deployed are for projects on Cardano, and we've seen this exponentially grow. And obviously we've seen jumps, like for example, when the ERC20 converter came out, that was huge, but we've seen this kind of steady incline. Daily we're adding 10, 20, 30 scripts. And it's so cool to see the smart contract growth, trajectory stay like that. And over here we have time lock scripts. The difference here is that time locks are more so for, a one instance transaction or token. So think of like NFTs. That's what time lock scripts are used for. But we're also seeing a steady increase there. But more so wanted to focus on the Pluto scripts. That shows us that developers are working hard. They're, putting out and deploying smart contracts at a pretty consistent rate. And we're seeing that reflected on the amount of projects that are now existing on Cardano, which is really, really cool. Now, the next thing I wanted to point out is a little bit of the wealth distribution amongst Cardano holders. So we've seen a bit of a shift here. We're seeing that basically starting around, Epoch 326, 327, we started to see a bit of a jump in terms of how much whales held of the total Cardano supply. So right now they hold about 20.5 billion out of the 34-ish billion supply out there. So you can see that this whole blue block is the whales and the rest is everyone else. And if we zoom out here on the right side, we can see that a majority of ADA holders hold, around 213 ADA, somewhere between 213 and 1,500 ADA. Now, that definitely puts it in perspective in terms of what can cause a shift in price, right? All it takes is one of these whales to dump a significant amount of coins. I'm not saying that's going to happen, or multiple whales buying or selling coins, right? So I think this is just something you want to keep in mind when you think about Cardano, when you think about what can affect price pressure. Just remember, we have seen a growing allocation of the total token supply towards whales. Just wanted to point that out. Now, the last thing in terms of, and I think this is somewhat bullish, in terms of DeFi, I know DeFi for Cardano is super, super early, and that might be, part of the reason that we're seeing this, but Cardano almost basically found more of a bottom in terms of DeFi total value locked than ETH did. So ETH and Cardano and, pretty much every single DeFi protocol saw this fall when Luna collapsed, right? Almost everyone was, needing liquidity at that time, starving for liquidity. Right here is that drop. Now, if we go to Cardano, we see that we get that drop right here, but the second drop, which just happened a couple of days ago, is not nearly as dramatic as Ethereum. So more people are staying in Cardano, at least percentage-wise, than Ethereum DeFi at this moment. Not saying that that's permanent. I just wanted to point that out. You can see here, this is a really steep decline. I mean, we're losing billions here in total value locked, and a larger percentage than we lost on the Cardano side. So I just wanted to point that out for food for thought. But now I want to jump into the exciting stuff. We're going to look at some charts, some key levels, and just try to chart out our path forward here, right? I want to set up some realistic expectations and hopefully give you guys some good insight. So the first thing I want to note here is just how far Cardano has fallen and then put that in perspective. So since we had that all time in September, we saw a drop of about 86%. Now, Bitcoin in the past two bear markets respectively has fallen 87 and 84%. So to see a altcoin like ADA fall 85, 95%, really not outside of the norm. So just wanted to set that expectation that, falling another 15 to 20%, totally in the cards, something that's happened before here in the history of crypto. So just wanted to touch on that. But the next thing I wanted to dive into was kind of addressing this shift in sentiment around Cardano. If you've been following ADA, you've kind of noticed this shift maybe more towards the bullish side recently. And I think that's because we've been ranging here for about a month, within, a 35-40% span. We've been looking at high 60-cent watermark and then low 40-cent watermark. But I would caution against getting super bullish right now. I think, in my opinion, we might have another leg down and then bounce. But why I would stay a little bit skeptical is because Cardano over and over again has teased us with these kind of really massive green ticks to the upside day after day, sometimes even a week at a time, like we saw here. And, you can see that we had this, but then directly after, it's almost, essentially a fake out. Just a couple of days after that, we have a massive move to the downside. So now the question becomes, do we have an official bounce here? Are we headed back to the upside, or is this green candle or set of green candles just another one of these fake outs? And then do we break this down to the downside? So that's kind of what I'm looking at right now. Just wanted to set the stage before we go a little deeper here. In terms of why this particular level is so key for Cardano is because we previously had this level of about 40 cents as a pretty critical resistance over here. And, this is back in, early last year. So definitely a long time ago, but now we're retesting this previous resistance. It looks to have flipped into support, at least for now, for the last month or so. But then the next target under here would be, 25, 28 cents. So we're looking at a pretty significant movement to the downside if we cannot hold this channel. Now, a couple of things to point out here. So we just had that crazy Fed meeting, 75 basis point hike, macro conditions not getting any better. A lot of that leads me to believe, like I referenced earlier in this chart session, that I think we're likely going lower and then likely actually tapping this previous support of about 25 cents right down here. So if we were to just, humor this thought for a second to say, okay, let's put the Cardano bottom somewhere between 20 and 30 cents. Not saying that's going to happen, just saying, that's more realistic than bottoming where we're at right now. But if we were to take that level and say, okay, well, let's start to take a look at what the key levels would be based on that, drawing this down to about 30 cents. We'll go a little bit lower to make it just a little bit more realistic here. But this retracement would be key levels based on us bouncing, around, let's say 25 cents. That's about where we have it at. And so if we're going to look at, okay, potential from where we're at right now, potential still another, 40% slide in the cards. That does seem a little steep right now, but anything's possible, especially with the macro headwinds that we are dealing with right now. But if we look at the key levels then going back forward, the next one that we have to crack is at about 90 cents. So if we do happen to bounce, it's very, very likely that we'd be range bound between that 23 cent marker, 25 cent marker, and that 90 cent. So right now, honestly, the game plan, this is not financial advice, but a lot of smart investors right now really just dollar cost averaging, knowing that there's still some decent risk to the downside, but obviously upside shows a lot more potential, right? I mean, we're 86% down from the all-time high. We could go under 100% down from the all-time high, and now on that reversal, if we do reverse, really the range bound area to look for is between 90 cents and that bottom that we eventually find. But just to recap, I don't think the bottom is quite yet in, but I do think things are starting to kind of change for Cardano a little here, even though the macro conditions have been very, very difficult. So hopefully that gave you guys some insight. Hopefully it was helpful. That's the key levels we're looking at and kind of where Cardano's at. If you got some value, drop a like, and we will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.